So, what do I want to blabble about tonight? Well, I guess one of the things that comes to my mind this evening is a question a buddy of mine had a week or so ago, and we spent a bit of time discussing it. He's been riding for a few years, and he sort of was inspired by the fact that in my first season of riding last year, I did a cross-country trip. He said he sort of always wanted to do one of those, and wasn't sure he could. He was impressed that I was able to, and I really said there wasn't really much to it other than a little determination. And he said, yeah, but my bike isn't quite ready to do the trip. And I'm pretty sure he drives an older Harley Davidson. Exactly what model, I'm not sure, but probably from the 80s or early 90s. And I said, well, what about it isn't ready for the trip? He said, well, it's not really all that comfortable for a long ride, and sometimes it's really hard to start in the morning, and and as he went on, I realized what he was really talking about is that he's never really done a long trip on this thing. So I asked him, I said, well, what's the longest ride you've done? And he said, one day I took an epic ride, and I went to visit a buddy in Kingston. Kingston, from our home in the west of the GTA, I guess depending on the traffic through Toronto, was about a 3-hour ride. And he said, by the time I got back from that ride, I was beat. He said, I was beat up bad, and I was exhausted. And I said, okay, well, that gives you an idea. That's probably about 6 hours of the ride, and that's your limit for the day. I said, to be honest with you, that's not bad. If you're able to pack in day after day, you can make a cross-country trip. And you could see his eyes lighted up a little bit. And he hadn't really thought about that. He said, yeah, but I was beat up pretty bad. Well, that's kind of where I started to, pass on some of the wisdom I had learned. And I thought I'd pass a little bit of that on to you guys as well. And the first piece of wisdom is, I guess this is going to be like the 3 R's of picking a bike for a long ride, is reliability. You're going to be stopping a lot. You're going to be stopping for gas, and you're stopping for the night. You're going to be stopping to take in the sights. And if that bike doesn't fire when you're ready to go every time, well, that's going to be a problem. If you've got wonky electrical wiring that the guy you bought it from put in, and the closest thing he ever came to an electrician was drinking beer with one 20 years ago, well, you're probably going to have problems. If every time it rains or if it's cold, it's a cranky bitch to get started, well, that's another concern. So reliability is number one. The last thing you want to be is stopping in an overlook through the Rocky Mountains to take a look at the Great Divide and not be able to get her going after that. So the next important item, besides reliability, which means picking a bike that not necessarily new, but hasn't been abused. The next important item is range. And you might say, well, hold it. You're a frickin' nutcase, man. I don't need a 300-mile range in my tank. And I'm going to say, you're right, you don't. But if your range is substantially less than 200 miles or 300 and something kilometers, you're going to find that in a lot of places out west, if you're in the east and you're heading west, which seems to be the direction that a lot of us are called to, you're going to find that gas stations are kind of few and far between out there. And you don't even have to go far outside of Toronto on the trip west to realize that there's not a gas station every 15 minutes like there is in the more populated parts of North America. So if you've only got a 100 and something mile range, you're going to have to do a lot more fuel planning. And to that point, you're probably going to want to keep a spare gallon of gas with you just in case. So while range isn't critical, boy, on a long trip it makes a lot more enjoyable. You're not worried about fuel. Not planning for fuel, you're planning to enjoy. And the last of the 3 R's I told my buddy was rideability. And that basically means, is the bike comfortable for you? You're going to be spending 8, 10, 12, 14-hour days maybe, day in and day out. I recommend everybody take a break from riding every 4th or 5th day. Find yourself a nice spot and spend a day, be it with family, with friends, just in a neat spot. Walk around, explore. enjoy where your bike has gotten you. But in those 4 or 5 days in between your rest stops, you're going to spend a lot of time in the saddle. So it's got to be comfortable. You can't be stretching for the bars. You can't have knee problems. So you're probably going to have to tweak the bike to fit you. I don't know who the average guy or gal is in terms of size that fits the bike. But every bike I've ridden for any length of time I found needed a few tweaks. The ST1300 I'm currently riding is pretty stock, except for 2 things. I've added some highway wings from Motorcycle Larry, and that's to give me another place to stretch my knees and my legs out on longer rides. And I've added a cheapy, I think it's a Go Cruise throttle lock, but I am probably going to slip a Kyoko on this thing before I do any longer trips. And that's again just to give my hand a rest from time to time. That's all about making the bike fit you. But individually for you, you might need to look at changing the seat. I haven't decided whether I'm going to go with a custom seat on this. On the V-Strom I put an Airhawk, and I might try the Airhawk on this bike as well. Also, a lot of guys use risers or adjust the handlebars. It's a personal thing, depends on your height, depending on how comfy you are in the bike. I debated putting risers on after the first couple of rides on this bike, but the more I ride it, the more I find I'm good for an hour and a half to 2 hours in the saddle. And that's about as long as you really want to take in one stretch without getting up and stretching. Otherwise, hey, to be honest with you, you sit in one spot for any period of time, you're going to get sore. So those are the 3 R's of picking a bike for a long ride. Reliability, range, and rideability. And if you're looking at doing a long ride, evaluate your current bike and see if it fits those 3 criteria. And if it doesn't, see if you can make it fit. Can you do some tweaks to the ergonomics and comfort, if that's the main problem? Do you need to look at adding an aftermarket gas tank, or maybe putting on a fuel cell? Or maybe, just maybe, that bike isn't the best suited for a long ride. One of the ironic things, a lot of guys like taking drives up to Alaska. One of the ironic things about that ride is that there's a lot of highway, a lot of gorgeous back roads to get there. But if you're going to do Prudhoe Bay, do the Dalton or the Dempster Highway through northern Canada, you're going to want to have a bike that's really dirt-worthy. And generally speaking, the more dirt-worthy a bike is, the less highway-worthy it is. And an online gent, one of my first motovloggers I discovered and really enjoyed, is a gent by the name of Billmaa, B-I-L-L-M-A-A, I think it is. Look him up. He's done a lot of long ride videos, great narration, some great photography. It's just a fun watch. But he did a trip up to Dead Horse in Prudhoe Bay last year, and he took a KLR 650. And he's got, besides a series of great videos about that ride, he's got a couple of videos of what he would have done differently, and one of the things he would have done differently was the KLR. He found it just didn't have the rideability he needed for the long drive to get to the Dalton Highway. And he bought a used KLR, and it had a few mechanical issues. Nothing really critical, but just enough to be bloody frustrating. So it didn't really have the reliability he was looking for either. So he's got a really good video on that, and on what bike he'd choose if he were to do it again, so I suggest you look it up. So that's basically wrapping up this video on how to choose a bike for a long ride if it's going to be your first one. I'm a frickin' nutcase.